God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, I want to thank
Morning, everybody. My name is Marty, alcoholic from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm glad Roy took a few minutes just to sort of share a little bit there. It's quite a remarkable story, and as far as hosts go, I mean, he's been great. The door knocked and I opened it up, and there was this beaming face there. And if any of you haven't experienced him yet in that regard, it's the first introduction I had was this guy was lit up. And sadly, I thought, okay, like Carl mentioned last night, I'm going to be speaking to the converted. People that attend these type of roundups and conferences about the steps are usually actually taking the steps. And I don't have much to do here, but maybe reaffirm and talk a little bit about my experience. And I was just shown a note there on the phone that I have 90 minutes to speak. And was it 90 or I'm dyslexic? 60 minutes, okay. I got 60 minutes. Like Carl, too, it's very, I'm so in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so passionate about you, about what AA is all about. There's no place I'd rather be. It's evident in my life and in my story. So to think about this endeavor that we're on, what a foundation laid last night too, right? The powerlessness feature, that piece that will always go back to the cart. What makes us similar is we'll always go back for another drink. There are many, many differences among us, but we'll always go back for the drink. And that no human power, nothing can stop that from happening. There has to be an absolute collapse. And then a reaching out that maybe there's something different. Maybe there's something different. And then wonderfully taken into that place of step 3 where there's a consideration about what was alcohol doing for me, and then needing to sort of supplant that somehow and making this decision in step 3. But I was, just to sort of take you back to where we're coming from here, I was always raised around alcoholism. What was the over-under on the jacket, Jace? Who won? Who won, buddy? I'm done with this stuff. Is that cool? That might be the longest it ever lasted. Easy. No, wait. I'm going into the naked corner. So I grew up in this house of alcoholism, and I got to tell you, there's a little place called the Ottawa Valley in northern Ontario, and there was a community of Cosgroves, our family, and everybody was basically related in this small community. And what we did is we beat the hell out of each other, and we played cards, and we danced with the fiddles, and we beat each other up and called the police. And my father was violent, and there was broken bones and blood in our home. And when we come out of our house on the Saturday morning as kids, the other kids looked exactly like us, black eyes, busted teeth. And that's how we grew up. It was a tough way to grow up. The rules in my house were don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Boys don't cry, you don't talk about what's going on. That was the rule. It was an absolute rule. And it was a way of life. It didn't have to be stated more than 1 or 2 whippings. It didn't have to be stated beyond that. And I loved my life. I had a fantastic childhood. I played hockey and I fished and I Tom Sawyered my life through a young, I had friends and I loved school. I did well in school and everything was absolutely perfect in my life until I would turn 12. And the reason that I say that something changed is I had my first couple bottles of beer in the basement of my parents' home and my life changed at that point. I had no idea how broken I was until I was fixed. I had no idea how smashed up inside I was until I was repaired. I had no idea how damaged I was until I was healed. 2 bottles of beer and I began to feel absolutely wonderful, just like I knew you guys felt all the time, just like I thought that people were supposed to feel. And I pursued that. And the drinking, I'm not going to stay here long. The drinking, because I didn't drink long. I drank 10 years. I had a 10-year drinking career. At 15, I'm bleeding out of both orifices. I'm hammering and got my arms wrapped around the toilet bowl, and it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm 15 years old. And you guys remember that beautiful condensation on the toilet bowl, and you used to just sort of rest your head against it and go, oh, the nice cool. Al and I usually go, oh, when I say that, but it's like, do you guys remember that? Like, it was, and so it's 5 o'clock, and I screamed out, I'm never, ever, ever going to do that again. And I meant it. I'm 15. I screamed, I'm done with that. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm into my third or fourth Bloody Caesar. I had to explain to these guys what that was last night. And I'm into my third or fourth drink, and I forget what happened that morning. And I'm off and running. 17 years old, I'm in jail. You guys came to see me. I was telling Roy yesterday about this new endeavor that he's embarking upon, where he's going in and carrying a message inside the walls. You guys kept coming to me. I never came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys kept coming to me. Well, why wouldn't I get in my car and drive to Maryland to be treated like this? Why wouldn't I do that? That we answer the call for that reason. My gratitude goes beyond just showing up at my local meeting and putting my hand out. It matters to me what you guys do. Again, 19 years old, because I'm making some of the decisions in my life, and it's going wonderfully well. I'm in a federal penitentiary, and I had this habit of making withdrawals from banks and not having accounts there. And so Carl was saying last night, the only room you could be in where the bank manager, the bank president, the teller, and the robbers in the same room. These guys all looked at me. So I wasn't a good robber. But the bottom line is that I was always being framed, and I just want everybody to know that, and I can make sure that's on tape. And so, fast forward through this thing about I can't stop once I start. What makes me alcoholic is I can't stop once I start, and the bigger aspect of that is I can't stop starting. For no rational reason, I will always pick up a drink again. I mean, I don't know if there even is one. But for anybody, I couldn't stop starting. So I kept ending up in trouble, and even while I was inside, I'm drinking all kinds of stuff that should not be consumed by man. And over time, my alcoholism just grew on me, and I had no idea what was happening inside me, and I became this hateful, raging individual. I fell to my knees in a jail cell on July the 16th, 1987. And my parole had been out. I'd been out in the street, and things had started going awry again. And here I was in this jail cell, and I dropped to my knees. I had not had a drink for 2 weeks. I was absolutely certifiably insane. I was 23 years old, and I screamed out, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I heard a voice say, you don't have to. You don't have to live like this anymore. And poof. If you read your literature, Marty Mann had the same experience, Bill Wilson had the same experience. And my room didn't fill up with light. Something inside me became light. Every heavy thing that was ever on me in my entire life to that point that I was aware of was gone. And I rose from my knees and I stood up free for the first time, and I knew it. Inside a jail cell. I knew it. I knew that something profound had just taken place. Now I want to tell you, this is actually not a bad segue, because there's tapes, there's CDs, there's lots of fill-in and that stuff, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about a process of recovery, a process of communion with a power, a process of growth and redemption and recovery. That's what we're here to talk about. July 16th, 1987, I had that profound spiritual experience. And I jumped into Alcoholics Anonymous in the back pocket of a sponsor for the next 5 years. And my Alcoholics Anonymous life was about going to meetings every single day because I love being with you. I was 250 pounds of jailhouse mad, so I thought that moving people was the 12 steps. My sponsor would say, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'd say, I don't know, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. And he said, yeah, we're moving this guy. And I said, is it his stuff this time? Alcoholics and addicts have a tendency to move other people's stuff and call it their own. But we seem to be moving people all the time. So we have this thing about service. Service is the secret. It's only secret to the person who's doing it. I had no idea what this guy was doing, but he just kept me busy and active in AA. And anytime the call came to help somebody, he'd volunteer me, and I'd be in the car with him to go and do it. We'd be sitting at a meeting, we'd hear some young woman come in and say, and I blew all the money, and I don't have any money to put lunches together for the kids. We'd go out to a 24-hour grocery, fill up a couple bags, go to the door, set them on the porch, knock on the door, hide in the bushes, and giggle like little girls in the bushes. Watching, they'd come out and, oh, Jesus, thank you. And we'd be sitting there. And he'd turn to me and he'd say, now don't tell anybody, son, it'll ruin it. You got to be humble. And then the next day, everybody in AA would know what happened, So it isn't even about doing what you like. Don't do what you say and all that kind of stuff. Just do what you're told. It doesn't even matter if that guy's doing it. So But I didn't know. I was unconscious in Alcoholics Anonymous having this whole experience with you. And you have to understand that my life had been torn to shreds. There wasn't anybody left in my corner. So I had no relationship with family. There was nothing for me to go back to. You were it. At Christmas time, I was telling Roy, at Christmas time, I spent all the time at the area social club putting out turkey because my alcoholic family was doing their thing. And I couldn't go there. And my mom was devastated that I couldn't go there. And I said to her, I got to be here. And she understood as years passed. And then eventually the whole thing transitioned and I could go back and became a leader in my family. And that's my story. Right? But there's something had to have happened. Now, I want to say 5 years in the back pocket of this guy. And like I said, meeting-based sobriety. But I love AA, and I love guys, new guys, drunk guys, violent guys. Those are the guys I work the best with, the big Bobby Badass guys. Those are the guys I do the best with. And I'm helping those guys, and some of them are not drinking anymore, and some of them continue to drink. Some of them live, some of them die. And I just thought that was the odds. That was what we were doing. And what was my help? Well, I would counsel them. I was a 23-year-old punk who'd spent my adolescence and young adulthood in prison giving grown men marital advice. I was a bank robber giving grown men financial advice. Like things like, sure, I'll hang on to your money for you, no problem. Only in AA. And this was what I was doing. And why? Because that's what everybody else was doing. Now, there's no Hamiltonians in the room, so I'm not going to offend anybody personally. But please hear what I have to say here, because Carl touched on it last night. It's not like AA doesn't work or it does work. That's not. You take these steps, it works 75% of the time. 3 out of 4 people get sober and stay sober. Those stats still bear out. They bear out in my basement. When I take guys through the steps in my basement, it's still 3 out of 4 that get sober, and stay in AA. But they take the steps. That is the program. If you're in Alcoholics Anonymous and haven't taken the steps, you're not in the program. You're in the fellowship. And the fellowship is a lovely place to be. It's a lovely place to be. There's a lot of fellowshipping going on here this weekend. It's fantastic. It's how we draw people in with love and with heart and with passion. That's how we draw people in. But there is a program here. And that program I never touched for the first several years I was in AA. I could tell you my story for the first 14 years of AA, and I'd have to leave that out. And you would pick up on it. People who have had a transitional thing happen to them in Alcoholics Anonymous through the steps would pick up on it and go, this guy never mentioned the steps. So I got to tell you, when I hear somebody speaking, and we're all rolling on the ground laughing our ass off because of their foibles and their character, and they're laughing, and they don't mention a step. It's only afterwards when I'm going home and go, that guy never even mentioned the steps. Never even came up. I wonder. And that's what happens to me. I wonder what message are we carrying? We carry this message. And I'm a technician. And I'll apologize for that now, because some people don't like technicians. They think Alcoholics Anonymous is like a cultivated system for them. We have a 12-step program of recovery. And I didn't even see that. At 14 years sober, now I want to say that in this time I'm not drinking. I'm educated. I have a family. I got way more kids than I should have ever had, and daughters. God has a sense of humor. And I got this career, and all this stuff is going on. And you ask my mother and my father about Alcoholics Anonymous, they say, that saved my boy's life. It saved my boy's life. They'd give a great Al-Anon pitch, right? And all this time, I'm nefarious, I'm lying, I'm robbing, I'm stealing, I'm hitting on chicks, I'm speaking all over the country. I'm Mr. AA. I am AA in Canada. 14 years sober, I'm the closing speaker on a Sunday morning because I'm so spiritually developed. I'm hanging out with the main banquet speaker on the Saturday. We're just shooting the breeze. Never met the man before. Just shooting the breeze. I'm telling him what a great AA guy I am, just like I just told you. And I'm sure he was laughing his ass off inside. And he said to me, you know, son, he says, you're asleep dreaming, you're awake. We were both sort of puffing. He was smoking like 5 cigarettes at one time and talking about fitness and health and stuff. And he says to me, you know, son, you're asleep dreaming, you're awake. Now, I knew, I'm not very smart, right? But I knew that was an insult of some type. I knew I should be insulted. I don't think he meant it that way, but I think I knew I should be insulted. And I was, hey, man, well, maybe you weren't listening. I was telling you about what a great I'm the Sunday morning speaker, pal. And he said, no, I can tell there's an experience in AA you've never had. And I said, oh, yeah, what's that? He said, the 12 steps. Well, I belong to a 12 and 12 group. What are you talking about? You didn't hear me? The steps are in every room I walk into. There's nothing I don't know about the 12. He said, I didn't say you didn't know it. I didn't say you didn't read it, study it. He said, I can tell you've never taken the steps. He said, you can tell that. He said, yeah. He said, if you want, I could help you with that. I had no idea what I had signed up for when I followed that man up into his hotel room. No idea. We walked in the room and he closed the door. He opened up the door and he closed the door behind me and he said, tell me about your drinking. And I spoke for about 30 seconds and he said, can you stop when you start? And I said, no, that's for sure. He said, that's one of the things you need to consider. He said, and if you promised and made promises and to people, you would, yeah, and then you couldn't pull it, yeah. So you can't stop starting. I said, no. He said, welcome to AA. And I'm going to tell you, it's 14 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I said I was alcoholic because I was sitting beside you and you said that. No one ever told me what an alcoholic was. Nobody ever told me that that's the criteria for Alcoholics Anonymous, alcoholism, alcoholics. Nobody ever told me that. So I was sitting there and I began to open up my mind and listen to the guy. And he said, powerlessness is the only issue in AA. You either are or you aren't. And I said, well, I am. Based on that criteria, I am powerless. He said, then you need a power, right? And he said, do you believe now? Talked about this last night. And I said, I've always had a belief, and I told him a little about it. He said, that's what we call a Bush League pinch hitter God. He said, you need to get connected to this power. Are you willing to believe in something? And I said, I am absolutely willing to believe in something. And I began to weep for the first time in my solid, cold, my entire concrete life. I began to weep. I knew something was happening. We're talking about a few minutes in a hotel room, guys, and he said, selfishness and self-centeredness, that's your problem. And he said, your life has been governed by self. And he said, is it still messy? And I told him it's terribly messy. And I was honest with somebody for the first time. I was more honest with him in that few minutes than I'd ever been with my sponsor about the lying, the cheating, the robbing, the stealing, sober. All I did was got into this position where if I didn't get caught, it wasn't wrong. Now, I don't know how your brain works, but somehow I managed that. Somehow I managed that in my head to be an effective tool for living. And I should not be relied upon to come up with tools for living, because that's the best I could do. And people were hurt, but I was crafty and I was shady, and I would bob and weave and duck through stuff. So he says to me in this third step thing, he says, we got to make a decision here. You're either in this or you're not. And he said, your proposition in step 2 is the latter part of the proposition is God is either everything else or nothing. What's your choice? And I said, it's got to be everything, as I was sobbing now. And then he said, would you do something with me? And he moved the coffee table out of the way, and he said, he draped his big arms over top of me. He was a big man, much taller than I am, big barrel-chested guy. I'm sure you met him, Carl. I'm sure you met him before. He drapes his arms over me, and he says the third step prayer. And as God is my witness, I'm saying, where the hell is he getting this from? This guy's a giant. He's a guru. This is a Swami. I mean, where's he getting this stuff from? And when we got up, and he gave me this embrace, and he said, he said, we've got to talk about this 4-step thing. And I looked at him, I said, where are you getting this from? And he said, the big book. When I was talking about nobody from Hamilton being here, God, I'm just telling you about Alcoholics Anonymous in 1987, where I'm from. I'm not going to tell you that people are alcoholic or aren't alcoholic, where they should be here, they shouldn't be here. It's not a debate I get into. But you can't call me a liar when I tell you that there wasn't a big book anywhere around the Alcoholics Anonymous that I walked into. And you can't tell me that people were running around taking people through the steps and sponsoring people and talking about God, because that's not what happened. The message was don't drink and go to meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, get to as many meetings as you can, find someone that you trust and ask them to be your sponsor. That was the AA I walked into. And the people there, they're good-intentioned, loving people. They weren't trying to rob me. It's a cultural thing. And it's a cultural thing that was there long before I showed up. And there's history on this, and you should learn it. If you're either in AA or you're not. And the history on this starts about 1970, and it goes up to just recently when walk into a room like this. Zoom has probably changed AA forever. Most of the meetings on Alcoholics Anonymous on Zoom are solution-based meetings, talking about God and talking about the steps, and most of them. And so we are exposed much differently now to the program of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. People believe, the AA I walked into, that the fellowship was the recovery program. And it's not. It's not. Sometimes it's to be survived. So I'm sitting there and I get up off my knees and he says to me, you got to make a grudge list. I asked him what that was and he told me, and I said, I can do that. He said, give me a call in a couple of days and we'll talk. So 6-8 days later, I gave him a call, and we started talking about the 4-step, and I wrote my 4-step inventory in AA through the book. I had done the Bryland 4-step inventory guide, a treatment center out of Buffalo, because that's what was floating around AA when I was there. I did the Hazelden 4-step inventory because it was something that I could get my hands on that was floating around AA at the time. If you Google, this is long before Google and all that crap, if you Google 4-step inventories, there's 4,000 of options for you right there. Boom. Like that. 4,000 options for a 4-step inventory, except this one. Except this one. So Carl sets the table for me last night. I'm powerless. I need power, and I access the power through that third step decision. And I love what he said. Take that piece out and just say this. Just look at it from this. Just look at it from this perspective. And make a decision. What's it going to look like? It's going to look like action. I didn't write the book. But how did I miss the point where it says it once? How did I miss the point that it says that experience I had with Mark Houston on my knees in that hotel room that day? How is that experience going to translate? It says, if I don't, no permanent effect is it's not going to be there. No change, no difference is going to be there unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid. That's what the book says. I never saw that. I never saw the book, but I never saw that. And I pointed out to people today, and they say they never saw that. And it's one of the only time frames that we're introduced to, and it's the first time frame we're introduced to, and it's at once. And I don't know where people, again, 1987 is cute for people to say, I did the 3-step waltz. 1, 2, 3, out. 1, 2, 3, out. It's on all the lots of tapes and CDs that talk about that 3-step waltz. I don't believe you can take a third step and not start writing. I don't believe it's even possible. If you follow the directions in the book, you don't even know you've taken a third step until what Carl said happens is that you're taking action, which is putting a pen to paper. That's just the way I look at it. When I talk about being a technician, defy that. Get your ass hairs all burnt up because I said, there's a technical piece here. It says here, at once, and said about making a grudge list. At once. But people will take a great deal of time between what they believe is a third step and what's happening in the fourth step. A great deal of time. And I believe, personally, it's where we lose a lot of people. We could qualify people in here as sick and defiled and beaten up, and alcohol has kicked their butt. And we can even suggest to them that they need something other than themselves. And at times, it says 50%. Sometimes people will nod, yes, that's good, I can go for that. And at other times they say, no, I reject that. But we say, are you even willing? And they say, yeah. And then we get into this decision, and they rudimentarily think they know what they're being asked in the third step. But what they're being asked in the third step is to do the fourth step. Does that make sense? And like I said, it was set up for me great last night. There's nowhere else to go except here. There's nowhere else to go. My will and my life is my action. My will is my thinking, which is going to interfere with my action all the time. You guys know what that's like. You want to go and do something else other than go to your meeting, or the phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning. Alcoholics never have problems at 7 p.m. It's always like 3 o'clock in the morning. You don't want to answer the phone. Contrary action says answer the phone. Sometimes people pull back and they say, I'm not doing it. And that's my will. My life is the action. The follow-through is the action. You can come in here, and if you're desperate and you're beaten, we can often get you moving in this direction, no problem. So we ask you to make a grudge list. That's how when I tell my guys, that's how I'll know you took a third step, is if you show me a piece of paper with a whole bunch of bastards on there you hate. Isn't that spiritual? It's lovely. That's what it looks like. I hate this. You guys know what a grudge list is good, If you've never done one, and I'm sure there's people in here that they think often about the fourth step. They've read it in the 12 and 12, and they discuss it in meetings at great length with their 30 years of sobriety, but they've never actually taken it. They've never actually done it. And this, guys, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the culture you're in. I don't think anybody's slipping through the cracks. Your life might be okay because you haven't drank for 30 years. But guys, I was 14 years sober. I had never done this. And when I did, my life changed. So I said about this list, and I make this list. Now, here's where I get into the technical piece because I think it's important. And I would be doing it an injustice if I didn't. Now, usually, because I do workshops on this more than I talk about it, there's always things, right? I remember I was telling the guys last night I was in Philly, there was a whole bunch of people there, and I kept turning back to the board, and there was nothing there. But here's what I want you to understand, is that if we find a way, we'll keep our individualism. We don't want to give that up, right? But if we find a way to have some semblance of fluidity or duplicity in our work, like if my guys that I work with take the instructions that I was given, then they too then will share those instructions with the guys they work with, and it goes, they tell 2 friends, and they tell 2 friends, and so on, and so on, and so on, and we create the fellowship we crave. It's how that works. Any point in there that you become a stark individual and say, I just think I'm going to do it this way, that's where the stuff breaks down. And it's not, again, I don't protest. I don't have any issue with that. The problem is that it won't be in line because the fidelity to this book is all that matters to me. And that's why I come off as a technician. So we have this grudge list, and what does it say we're going to do? We have manifestations of self. What that means is that where does my selfishness and self-centeredness, where does that show up in my life? What are the demonstrations of my selfishness and self-centeredness in my life? We all have these manifestations. All people have manifestations of self. Our common manifestations, as they're referred to in our book, that's the precipitating sort of, is that, and that's why we nod when we're talking about resentment. It's why we all nod in big crowds when we're talking about fear. Marriages and relationships. Like, we suck at them. You know what I mean? Like, everybody starts nodding, I've been married 3 times, 7 for me, We're just not good at it, right? So these manifestations of resentment, fear, and sex conduct, that's what we have in common. That's what we can talk about. That's the stuff that we can, oh my God, nobody's ever talked to me like this. When you hear the first person to talk to you about alcoholism and you have this awakening. It's like this shot in the arm, like Carl was saying. It's just like, oh, yeah. And he was saying too, like just, yeah, that's me. Well, this is where we get to in this place too. So this manifestation of resentment, infinitely grave, knocks more people out of the box than anything. Resentment, who am I angry at? The book says, go back through your life. Where were you sore, hurt, pissed off, upset, interfered with ever? That's the language of the book. They don't say pissed off. I added that one in. I wrote it in there. So, because I wanted it had to gravitate towards where I'm at today. Grumbling? Anybody in here a grumbler? That stuff like, yeah, I got kids, right? So I remember one time, I'm deeply sober and highly, highly developed spiritually. And I iron my clothes every morning. So I go downstairs and I put the iron on, I get showered and I come out and my nice hot iron's ready and I take my nice white shirt, my crisp white shirt, and I start to iron it. And I'm going like this and it's pink. It's turning pink. I go, what the hell? And I look and it's all, my daughter had used the iron to iron her hair. And I like, Jesus, up against the wall, again, deeply spiritual, highly developed. Grumbling still exists in my life today. Resentment, infinitely grave. Grumbling still comes to occur. It has to be managed through the same process. However, these things go down on paper. Well, I didn't come up with the rules. It's just what it says. We list them. We list them on paper. We put them, who am I angry at? Boom, boom, boom. First column. Why not use columns? The book says use columns. There are columns. There's demonstration of columns. Why not use columns? Why do you get to write your life story? Because you got confused about what it says in the 5th step. It says columns. There's columns there. There's an example there. Here's your 4th step. There's an example right there. But you're going to find a new, unique way. Because you're higher developed than the peon alcoholics that wrote this book. I don't know how you have come around. Well, I do know. 14 years I know. So, bottom line is I had never had the experience of this. So, this is what I was saying to these guys last night when I was having dinner. I want to leave you here with something a little bit different as a technician. I want to leave you with something here, hopefully for a few people that's new. So I'll hurry and get to it. So pretend there's a big chart behind me. This is who I'm angry at. The cause. What they do to me. What happened? What's the incident about? I got to write. And if I'm just an angry, pissed off guy my whole life, sorry, you're going to be doing a lot of writing. That's just the way it goes. You maybe should have chilled a little bit earlier. You're like, taking yoga or something, because you're going to have a lot of writing, and so you write, this is the reason. And then it affects mine. And a lot of people want to try to figure out, when I'm doing this thing, I say, well, how did it affect you? And a lot of newer people will start talking about deep psychological wounds and scars. And why don't we just go with what it asks here in the book? Did it affect your self-esteem? Did it affect your personal ambition? Did it affect your personal relations? Did it affect your pocketbook? These are the areas you're going to see where it affected. Now, there's your first 3 columns that are laid out in the big book. They're there, typeset on that page. As a person, I was sexually abused when I was 8 years old. And as a person who had been hurt that way, Buddy made it into my inventory. Mr. C. Cause. What did he do to me? He abused me. He hurt me. He lied to me. He betrayed me. He manipulated me. Any manipulators in the room? Come on, put your hand up. Play along, for Christ's sakes. All right. He manipulated me. He conned me. Boom, 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 boom. This is the second column. And all the CEOs in prison and all the therapists, that's what they wanted to talk about, was that. They wanted to talk about that. And when it would suit me, I would let them. Would it get me out of a jackpot or trouble? I was a broken man. I was a broken man. And that's how it worked. Now, third column, the areas that it affected me. Nobody ever has a problem with that. 1,400 people in an auditorium helping me fill out my inventory one night, and they started screaming out, how did it affect me? They were screaming out, your self-esteem, buddy. And they're getting right into it with me. And we got those first three columns, and it's beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely useless, but beautiful. I'm a therapist. That's what I do for a living now. Talking about the problem is useless. Let's find out what it is, and let's see if we can move toward a solution. Now, what happens in our book is it turns to text. I wish it had just kept the columns in there somehow and explained them a little more, but it doesn't do that. It turns to text. It says we're going to look at things from a completely different angle. Can I perhaps see that person as spiritually sick? Anybody here object with that? That man that hurt me, spiritually sick? Sure? Yeah, spiritually sick. He's sick, I'm sick, everybody's sick. You know what I mean? No problem. I can see the guy is spiritually sick. It says, God, save me from being angry. The prayer in the fourth step isn't, God, please grant them everything that I had hoped for myself. Like on page 552 or whatever that is, whatever that direction was that I got in 1987 when I was pissed off, go to this freedom from bondage thing. That's not what this is. This doesn't say anything about forgiveness. It doesn't say anything about forgiveness here. It says, can I see that person as spiritually sick? If the answer is yes, then I say this prayer. Where can I be of help to that person if he's dead and he had been many years? And it says, God, save me from being angry. That's the prayer. God, save me from being angry. Can you feel that prayer? Can you feel that prayer in the depths of your rage and your anger? God, save me from being angry. That's all I'm asking for. I don't need anything else. I don't need flowery words. God, save me from being angry. Check. I'm just following the directions. I don't even believe in God. It doesn't indicate there that I have to believe in some deity or anything like that. I'm just following the directions. Where'd I get the directions from? The book, my sponsor, the book, you. Just following the directions. That says the last column. For years, I took guys through the steps, and the last column said, my part. That's what it said in it, my part. Nowhere. This is how elusive the truth can be about in Alcoholics Anonymous, even if you're a big book lawyer like me. Nowhere in there does it say my part. It says my mistakes and faults. We look for my mistakes and faults. So the first question it asks me to consider, and it asks me this specifically, and I ask you, please reread your book, look at your four-step inventory, and the first thing is, what did I do to him? That's the first question. What did I do to that person? Forget what they did to me for a second. What did I do to him? What's the answer to that question? Anybody know the answer to that question? Well, one guy yelled out from the back room in a big auditorium one day. He says, you went there, because he was a candy man in the neighborhood. He was a legitimate candy man back in the 60s, 70s. We had legitimate candy mans. It wasn't a bad term. Some guy in the back says, you went there for candy. And I went, I was 8. I was 8. But that could be something. It's your inventory. This is the area where it is your inventory. You can put whatever you want. But some guy yelled out, nothing. He can do nothing. There are people in here who have been victimized. But I'll say this here in case I forget to say it later. I don't know a sober victim. I don't know one single solitary victim that I've ever met in Alcoholics Anonymous that's got sober. I'm not telling you that the shit happened in your life didn't happen. I'm telling you that if the victimization stays, your sobriety will be elusive. Your peace of mind and your connection with power will be elusive. I'm just telling you that. Raped, traumatic circumstances, sexually abused. So I remember sitting there and I'm looking at this stuff from this angle. Well, he did nothing. And that's where most people stop the work. That's where most people stop. My mistakes and faults. What did I do? I did nothing. But the book gives us another taste, and this is what I want you to understand. And if you don't see it in there, please check your book later and see if it's there. Call me up, tell me I'm a liar and I'm full of shit. But the next thing that it says, how about we dismiss the other person entirely? Where were we at fault? What mistakes had I made? And I use his second column to look at my inventory. Have I ever been manipulative? My mother comes up on there. My sister comes up on there. Have I ever lied to anybody? Oh, no. Any liars in here? I start right. This. I thought this was like going to be his inventory. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, come on now. I'm in the last column, and I'm writing about lying. I'm lying about betrayal. What comes up for betrayal for me is looking my mother deep in the eyes at 17 years old through the glass in a jail again, promising I'm never going to do it again, and then pulling it all down on her head because I didn't even suffer the ramifications of my action. My loved ones did, and I pulled it down over and over again. I betrayed her over and over and over again. My sexual abuse turns into an inventory of my betrayal of my mother. The power of this fourth step cannot be understated, but only if you follow the directions implicitly. And I'm asking you, please, look at it this way. First thing we do is, what did I do to that person? The second thing we do is, have I ever done those things to anybody? And my last column starts showing up with the names, not just the behaviors. I did this, and this, but shows up with the names. And then it says, tag it. Where was I resentful, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? I tag those things. I tag those behaviors because at the end of the day, the nature of my wrongs are underneath that. It's underneath that. That's what I'm going to be going and talking about in the fifth step. And that's my resentment inventory. That's what it looks like. I beg you to have a look at it with an open mind and a new pair of glasses and put aside everything you think you know and have an experience of doing an inventory like that. Please. I don't care how long you've been around here. If you're brand new, I don't have any problem talking to people who are brand new in AA about doing it like this. The only problem I have is people who have been around here for 18, 20, 25 years, and I've actually never done it, refusing to do it this way or do it at all. That's the only sort of thing I come up against, because I do come off sometimes a little bit charged with this stuff, right? It's sort of a mistake. I mean, you're misassessing me. It's I'm told I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, and I am, because, hey, talk about lighting up. So I have this experience. That is my experience. And if it sounds like I'm a technician, it's because it's my experience. So we get into this fear piece, and everybody wants to sort of, how many people in here have fear as a primary sort of issue? You have that low-grade anxiety before your feet even touch the floor in the mornings. And it's just doom and gloom. Something's going to go wrong. And I work with a lot of guys like that. Well, our book tells us this very succinctly. It says, what do? We get them down on paper. We put them down on paper. And then it says, we ask ourselves, why do I have these fears? And then it goes on to tell us it's because self-reliance failed, which means for these fears that you put down on the paper when it asked you, what are your fears? You put them on paper. There were many fears there that you didn't have that you didn't put down on paper. Does that make sense? It asked you what your fears were, you put them on the paper. And then it asked because self-reliance failed. What that means, what we hearken that to, is a memory like if you go back to learning how to ride a bike. And you ask yourself, was I scared? Well, yeah, I was 5, 3, 4. I was, small. I was scared. Well, you're scared of riding a bike now? No. Self-reliance worked. But in this regard, when we ask you about fear, it's still there. You said it. It came up. So it's right there. And it says, we look at these fears, and we ask ourselves why we had them. And then we step back and we say, man, it gives us a little information about this reliance on this power. And it's the first time it really says we're coming to rely upon this power. We're actually starting to understand. Now, the way I say it, guys say, no, that's not true, man. I don't believe in God. And I said, well, I don't know if you believe in God, but seeing you do this, I believe in God. What do you mean? You're the most arrogant, defiant, anarchistic dickhead I have ever met. And you've taken these steps with me. You did a resentment inventory. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I don't know. Because there's another power working in your life, you knob. So let's just put that aside and let's move forward. Let's go on, So they got their resentment inventory done. They got their fear inventory done. And now we're going to talk about sex. Now about sex. We're going to talk about conduct in your relations. That's what we're going to talk about. And I ask my guys all the time to subject themselves to this quite thoroughly. And if any of my guys were here right now, I'll tell you about that in a second. So I ask you put the names down, you go back. I get them go back to that first little heart throb, I remember, and I'll share this story. I remember I was 6 years old. I was in grade 2, and I had this teacher, and her name was Miss, I shouldn't say her name, I guess, anymore. Her name was Miss Nanny. And she was beautiful. Beautiful. And I was 6. And she had this long, shiny black hair. And I loved her, man. You remember you used to beat the teachers' brushes and stuff from the chalkboard when we were kids, and you were always that little guy in the class that she had favor for, and I'd bring her an apple and all that. I loved her with all of my heart. All of my heart. I wouldn't even go out for recess. I loved her so much. And so summer passes, we come back to fall, and her name's Mrs. Konowalski. The bitch cheated on me. I was mortally wounded. Now, how does that come up? How does it? Don't laugh, guys. That hurt. I was wounded. Now, here's the thing about this, and some of you guys are going to know what I mean. What would you do if I told you that never changed up until last week? I thought you should know I love you. The rudiments of that affair I was having was in my head. And I thought she knew. Do you see what I'm saying? I still act like that today. I think my wife should know. She should know. Why? I don't know. I clean your brushes. I put the garbage out. I think people should know. That's the defect. You know, and at 6 years old, I was wounded. She's on my resentment list. She ends up on my sex conduct. How does that happen? It's because this is the culture of my relationships, folks. This is the culture. I'm having an experience all by myself. I have no way of communicating it. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel are the rules. I have no way of engaging in a process that's healthy. And I expect everybody around me to know what it is that I'm experiencing. And when they don't, I get crushed. I get hurt. You know, and so that's how I live in my sex conduct. So I put these names down, and again, and this is one of those areas, if you've got because this is where you're going to do more writing than anywhere else. And again, you probably wouldn't have done all the things you did if you knew you were going to have to write about it one day, but that's on you. So you got this sex inventory, and it asks these specific questions. It kind of says, well, what happened? Tell me about the situation. You just write a little bit about the situation. The person beat me, they lied to me, they stole from me, they left me, they abandoned me, they cheated on me. And there's so many wonderful times where I've been in these workshops, and there'll be a woman sitting there and say, he cheated on me, you know. And I say, oh, okay, he cheated on me. And I write it on the board, and then we get to this place, and I say, well, what about you? What did you do? Well, I cheated with his friend, you know, and that always happens. And it's like, holy crap, they weren't coming in there. They were coming in there to have their moment, right, about being a victim. They find out they weren't victims, they were victimizers. So they look in this inventory here, and it says, who did I hurt? And you go through the inventory, and you got a partner, and their family really liked you. And you hurt their daughter, and you hurt them. And they go down, and this is how it goes. They had a brother that you were friends with or something like that, and you're no longer friends with him. You hurt him. And you go through these areas. Whom did I hurt? And it says, what could I have done instead? So this is an important piece, and this is what I want to leave you with in this 4-step piece. What could I have done instead? The minute you start writing what you could have done instead, you're looking at what you did to the person, or about the person, or involved with the person, and it says, what could I have done instead? You begin to formulate what our book calls an ideal. And it's a God-given ideal because you don't know that ahead of time. Even if I give you a spoiler right now, you cannot avoid coming out the other side with an ideal, with a set of principles that you cannot live up to on your own, which tells me here that I have to ask God to help me to live up to them because I can't live up to those ideals on my own. I'm going to be more honest. I'm going to be more communicative. I'm going to be more forgiving and patient and tolerant. I'm going to pat her on the ass when I'm walking by and tell her I love her. These moments of affection, like, well, hey, all the guys I work with, that's what I tell them because they're separate. They get into these busy lives with small kids and with all kinds of obligation. And young guys are the best guys to work with because they got so much clutter in their head. And you say to them, this is what you're going to do. When she's standing with her back to you, you're going to go up behind her and embrace her and kiss her on the neck and tell her you love her. Why? Why would I do that? Because I told you to, you dipshit. You know, oh, she's going to think I'm weird. You are weird. It's like, just do it. You know, and then they call a little while. They say, oh my God, I can't believe it. We're holding hands a little bit more. We're going out for walks together. It's like this. We separate ourselves from one another. So what I'm talking about there, when I said earlier about the guys, if I had a guy I sponsored in this room, I could say, hey, Johnny, pull out your ideal. He could reach in his pocket and he could pull out his sex ideal. It would be laminated or it would be on a little piece of paper folded up in his wallet and it would have those things on it. I'm going to treat women this way. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be this. I'm going to show up this way. These are manifestations of self. Demonstrations are manifestations. It's how it looks. Selfish, self-centeredness is a manifestation. These things, other-centeredness, thoughtfulness, consideration, and kindness are manifestations of self. This self is going through this transition through my actions. Like Carl's, and I'm only in the 4th step. What I did do, now, everybody got that? That technically is your 4-step inventory. That's it in a nutshell. Everybody got that? Anybody here never do a 4-step? Oh, beautiful. Thank you for being the one brave person the one honest person in the whole room. Thank you. Do I excite you about it? The thing about it is, like, It's a magnificent sort of trip. I got to tell you, the number one reason to be excited about it is because you get to tell someone else to do it and show them how to do it. That's the number one reason to get excited about this. Your own inventory sucks. You know, you might get lit up here with the urgency and the need to go and get it done. But trust me, about an hour after you start writing, you're going to go, oh, that guy's a dick. Why am I doing this? This is terrible. I thought this was going to be a feel-good exercise. It's not. Sharing it with another human being is a feel-good exercise, and sharing, like instructing somebody else on how to sort of run through this. Now, this thing about the fifth step, and how much time do I get?
10 minutes.
Beautiful. I think since the beginning of time, there isn't any sort of major religion that doesn't have confession as a part of its tenure. And if you're involved in it, it's almost like an expectation, and I was raised a Catholic, and I remember being a young kid. You remember me talking about when I was 6 and 7 years old. I remember standing in line, waiting to go into the confessional and thinking to myself, because I was already a rationalizer, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I didn't really do anything. I got nothing to confess. I better come up with some stuff, and make it interesting. So I started asking guys around, what are you going to say? And I stole their story, and I went in first and stole all their stuff and had no appreciation for the nature of what it was I was doing. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous many, many years later, and they have this fifth step there. And this fifth step says we admit to ourselves, to God, to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. So I have this inventory, and in the last column I have the exact nature of my wrongs clearly written right there. I'm going to go and I'm going to take this inventory and I'm going to read it. But what I do before I start writing is I make an appointment. I make an appointment to go and do that fifth step before I even start writing. This is a task. It's a life and death errand. So I know that it has a beginning and it has an end point. It should, anyway. There are a lot of people that, hey, man, you got to get working on that fourth step. You see them 3 weeks later meeting, you say, how's that fourth step come? Well, I went to the dollar store and got a tablet. What the hell is a tablet? So one of those little ring binders with paper in it. Oh, yeah, you spent the last 3 weeks doing that? Well, no, I got some pens, too. And good. Okay, I'm giving you like 8 days, man. Get on it. 8 days you got. Let's go. You burnt 2 days already. Let's go. Get your inventory going. Talk to them 2 or 3 weeks later. How's that inventory coming? Well, the dog got sick, and that happens, right? This is going on, and I had to work a lot of overtime, and it's like, and I'm going to get to it. And guys, don't falter here. This is a priority. It's not, oh, Carl, that was great last night when you said AA isn't a place I come to visit. I live my life, and I come to visit AA. My life is AA, and I come to visit the real world. And that's how it works. This stuff is important. I'm not going to ask you to do this more than once myself. You will find it necessary to do it often yourself. But I'm only going to ask you first run through. I'm talking about respite care. We need to do this now. So in the fifth step, I make an appointment. I make the appointment. And why do I make the appointment before I start writing? Anybody know? So I actually start writing. And it isn't an alcoholic alive that if I give a guy 10 days to do his inventory, when do you think he starts writing? Oh, you're my people, man. You're yeah. Night 9, not even day 9. Oh, up all night. And then you come showing up and you got a little matchbook of resentments. And it's like, oh, that's lovely. Why don't you go back and try it again? Quit fooling around. This is a life and death errand. Sometimes I got to remind them, not the other way around. This is not, because they've been to enough meetings now that they heard to relax and take it easy. They didn't get sick overnight. They ain't going to get well overnight. What kind of horse shit is that? There isn't anybody in Alcoholics Anonymous that I couldn't sit down with and prove that wrong. Nobody. One day I was this way, and the next day I was this way. Period. I don't give a shit if it happened when you're 20 years sober. This thing about not getting well overnight, that's exactly how it happens. One day I felt this way, and the next day it was like, holy crap, it's changed. That's an overnight experience for me. That's an immediate now, God moment. That's when it happens, right now. So I make this appointment. The guy comes up. He shows up with his inventory, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. And it says we're going to be prepared for a long talk. I'm getting better at that. I remember one of my great sponsees, Jeff. He's our delegate, actually. Great, great guy. We sat down and we're doing this inventory. I'm in the basement. I got this little L-shaped room where I do all my groups, and I'm listening to this guy's fifth step. And my kid's got a rabbit. They got a rabbit, and his name is Martin. Actually, my name's Marty. The rabbit's name is Martin. So Martin's over in the corner, and him and I are sitting there. We're just puffing away. We smoked about 3 packs of cigarettes each, and the rabbit died. My kid's rabbit died right in the room. We smoked the little bastard to death, and we didn't even know. He was over there gagging and choking and stuff like that, and he's going through this inventory, and oh my God, he's explaining every single resentment. It's going on and on and on. It was 15 hours later, he has a full asthma attack and has to be sent to the hospital. And there's Martin, dead there, and one eye missing, but I learned that you don't have to go that. You don't have to do that. When it says we get prepared for a long talk, I think they're talking about a sensible talk. I think that's what they're talking about. You come to me and want to talk about all this stuff. You want to write little cues on a cue card and then take up my afternoon that I could be with my children because you're going to explain every little cue you put on your cue card and tell me that's inventory? If you don't write about it, I ain't listening to it. That's it. Our book says we put this stuff down on paper. I didn't make the rules. We put it on paper. If you don't write it, I'm not listening to it. Does that mean we don't have a discussion at times? Sometimes we have to close the book and I have to go over and give the person a hug. Sometimes I have to put them on the head and I said, no, this is tough stuff you're going through here, buddy. But I'm right here. We're not going anywhere till it's done. And I don't care how long it takes. And it never takes very long when you approach it that way. When God's a part of this process, I know this for a fact. I'm never closer to the God of my understanding as when I am with another alcoholic. Never. I've been to church services, ceremonies, told you about Catholicism. We're doing always Irish too. Like we're always in churches and shit, and up and down and eating bread and all that stuff. We're doing all kinds of stuff, right? But I like people. I like this. I hear the message. I like it all, but I never feel closer to God than when I'm with you. And when we get the opportunity and the blessing to take a fifth step, to hear a fifth step, I think that's the greatest thing we ever get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really believe that. And so I wouldn't rob you of the process of doing it correctly and having a good experience through it. And again, when I use words like correct, I don't mean as a technician that there is this way to do it. I'm saying that there is this way in this book. I will relay that to you. When you go through it, my understanding of that is going to be involved in what you do. You've asked me to sponsor you. You've asked me to guide you through this. You've asked me to take you and show you the way. I will show you this way. And we'll have as much fidelity to this as possible. We come out the other side. You know, I always ask God in the room, and I thank God for being present. I've never, ever not felt the presence. Never. And I don't know how many fifth steps I've listened to in my life. There are times where I've been less invested because I'm a human being and I can be distracted. I can be distracted by the nuances of my own life while some poor guy's sitting there just purging it all, and I'm trying to be present. But my being present is not the objective. His cleaning house is the objective. Kevin was doing his fifth step with me about a year ago, another fifth step, and I fell asleep. I was out cold for about an hour. Yeah. Yeah. And in my justification and rationalization, when I woke up, he said, you were just sleeping all that time, right? And I said, hey, buddy, you need to know that if it doesn't cause me any anxiety, it shouldn't cause you any anxiety. I want to thank you for putting me to sleep, and I had a good rest. And, you know, the thing about in the spiritual context, they worked. It's okay, you know. And certainly I apologized and said, you know, liven it up a little bit next time. Get into some shit or something. Do something a little crazy or something. I mean, boring the hell out of me, you know. And, you know, hey, guys run to people with inventory and they think that the world is ablaze. And oftentimes when they put it on paper, they have an experience that they realize the fire is not quite so hot. But oftentimes, even more so, when they sit down with their sponsor or the listener to read their fifth step, they realize it's not hot at all. And in this moment, the embers are going to be tossed. Something happens when we pull that stuff from the inside and put it outside. The reason we write it down is because of that effect. But when you sit down and share with another human being, like my beautiful friend Sandy used to say, it's all great, you know. Now what am I going to play with? Your ego has been absolutely tarnished for life. Your ego just found out who's really in charge. When you do this stuff, despite all the messages you've got in your head, your ego loses one more battle, and it pulls back just a little bit more. When you reveal all of this stuff, and it's absolute humbling and magnificent experience, the ego doesn't stand a chance. And so I come into this place right now where I'm all beaten to a pulp and I can't understand why, and it keeps happening. And now I'm in this place where I'm in respite care for a few weeks, and I've already started this inventory thing, and I've shared with my sponsor. I'm 2 months sober, 3 months sober. I'm sharing this stuff with my sponsor in my fifth step. And I get into this position where it asks us these questions. You know, it asks us these questions. We're going to assess where we are so far. And you're asked to do that alone. This really is the only time reference in AA. You know, the fifth step isn't over until this happens. You take that stuff up from wherever you just laid it all down, and you go back to wherever it is you're going to take that hour. You sit quietly in that hour and you contemplate, how did I get to this place? How did I get from there to here? How did I get here from the detox? How did I get here from the loneliness and the desperation and that diabolical madness that exists inside my head? It's not on right now. It's not on me right now. How did that happen? And I look at these steps and I say, am I powerless? I'm still powerless. I mean, it's true about me. And then do I believe that maybe there's something? Absolutely I do. And then can I stick to that deal that I make in step 3? Can I be a part of that sort of magnificent process in step 4? And I do it. And the only way I do it is by writing it. Is that a question?
No, sorry.
Oh, I love questions. Oh, I thought we were going to get into something great there. But we have this experience in those first 5 steps, and we ask ourselves, am I work solid so far? Am I grounded in this? The way I ask my guys is, could you go and share this with somebody else right now? Well, the question is, could you take what you know right now and have experience in your first 5 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and share that with somebody? And they go, I think I could with the book. I said, then you're ready. Is our work solid so far? That's pretty solid. You could duplicate this, right? Yeah, that's pretty solid work. And then you know where this goes, right? You're going to ask God from the bottom of your heart to sort of give you some direction around this next couple of steps, and away you go. And that's a 1-hour process. Again, I see all kinds of people who stop here and chill for a while, like they've just done something magnificent, which you have, but we can't rest. We can't stop there. There's no place to rest there after the 5th step. None. 1 hour to assess, is my work solid so far? And then we embark on the rest of the programs, to step 6 through 12. And again, time. This is not static, guys. This is like this. It's a motion that there's, again, no place I believe personally that with the exception of the 4th and 5th step, I believe you could take the steps right now. That's what I believe. N-O-W. How do I know that? Because when you get into step 6 and 7, it's going to use that word over and over and over again. They're talking about right now. And you get in touch with the spiritual life in steps 10, 11, 12 while you're making your amends. That stuff happens right now. You did your inventory and did a 5th step an hour ago. Now you're going to live in step 6 through 12, and you're going to engage in the process that's being asked of you. You don't go and take years to make your amends and then endeavor to help others. We need you here now. We need you doing this kind of stuff immediately. We need you right now carrying this message, helping people. So why would we slow you down? So I hope that my little explanation there on inventory helped. I think it's a magnificent thing that we have in our program that's common to other sort of spiritual endeavors. But for us alcoholics, look at the manifestations. Look at them. Like resentment, fear, and sex conduct. We just look at those, and this is what comes out the other side. I find out that I wasn't a good deal. And that's the wreckage I need to clean up. And I hope that you have a great experience here for the rest of the conference. I hope that laid the groundwork for Section 7. Thanks so much for letting me be here and share.